Emma Caldwell is a unique character in the military. At the age of just 28, she has risen from an ordinary soldier to a renowned captain. But what makes her stand out is not only her rank or combat achievements. It's her ability to see through the essence of leadership and her courage to face the hidden truths that few dare to acknowledge, especially in such a strict environment like the military. While most soldiers focus solely on their mission and victory, Emma sees something deeper: the nameless sacrifices, the painful decisions, and the losses that no one can understand unless they stand in the shoes of the soldiers leading the way. She is not just fighting for an ideal. She is also standing up to speak the truth about the costs that the military must bear. That is why she wrote a letter to President Donald Trump, requesting to meet with him. Despite being young and holding a lower rank in the army, Emma was not afraid of being seen as too young or lacking experience. In fact, she believed that her youth and straightforward perspective could bring a fresh outlook, the voice of soldiers who have never had the chance to speak up. She wasn't afraid to challenge the outdated norms, even though it could bring criticism. And despite the challenges ahead, she remained determined to go all the way to represent the silent soldiers, those who have sacrificed and will never be acknowledged. Emma was not just a soldier. She was an inspiration. Someone who fought not only with weapons but also with words and actions to protect the values she believed in. Emma's inner conflict began the moment she sat down to write the letter to the president. It wasn't just a professional decision, but a step into territory she had never dared to enter before, a step that could change the entire course of her military career. She always knew the military was not a place where you could easily speak up about the things no one dares to address. Everything here is based on discipline, obedience, and silent sacrifice. She had learned to hide her emotions and wear the mask of a tough soldier. But as time passed, facing the losses and the true cost of leadership, she began to feel suffocated. The soldiers she had fought alongside had sacrificed, and she couldn't just stand by silently, continuing down a path that she knew had too many shadows. She knew writing a letter to the president could be a dangerous move. If the president declined to meet her or if her words were seen as criticism, she could lose her career, even the trust of her colleagues and superiors. In the military, whistleblowing on sensitive issues is not an easy action. It could make her an outcast, a traitor, in the eyes of those who still believe that the military must remain strong and not show any weakness. However, when thinking about Lieutenant Jake Carter, her closest friend who had sacrificed due to a decision she made during a failed mission, Emma couldn't bear it any longer. Jake, who had always supported her, lost his life for a reason that no one remembers: the sacrifice that went unrecognized. And Emma knew that if she didn't speak up, soldiers like Jake would be forgotten forever. Am I betraying the military by doing this? She asked herself. Am I dishonoring those who are fighting tirelessly for the country? These questions haunted her every time she picked up her pen. But in that moment, Emma realized that silence and turning a blind eye weren't the solutions. She couldn't live with the feeling that she hadn't done anything to protect those who sacrificed, those who couldn't speak for themselves. Finally, Emma decided to write the letter. But it wasn't an easy decision. In the letter, she didn't just express her dissatisfaction but also called for change, acknowledging that leadership isn't just about victory. It's about taking responsibility for the losses as well. Her words were not a threat or betrayal, but the voice of a true soldier, standing up to protect the values she still believed in. This decision was facing a profound internal conflict between maintaining her career and personal reputation in the military and doing what was right to ensure that soldiers, those silent martyrs, would never be forgotten. Lieutenant Jake Carter and Emma Caldwell had been friends since their early days in the military. They had trained together, shared dreams of serving the country, and Jake was always the one full of enthusiasm, ready to put himself in dangerous situations to protect his comrades, while Emma trusted in his leadership ability. They were inseparable, and in each other's eyes, they were soldiers who couldn't be replaced. But then, one day, when the mission became too complicated and the war situation escalated, Emma's decision led to a serious mistake. In a large-scale attack, she ordered the team to advance into an area that the intelligence had reported to be highly dangerous. But no one knew that the intelligence was wrong, and Emma's team fell into a deadly trap. Jake was the first to volunteer to lead the team, always willing to face danger to protect the others. He knew that Emma's decision could bring risks, but he never questioned her command. They were friends, and more than that, they were comrades, a bond that could never be broken. When the bomb exploded, Emma's world collapsed. In one horrifying moment, she saw Jake fall, blood staining the ground, his eyes wide open, looking at her as if he wanted to say something that she couldn't hear. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Emma couldn't believe her eyes, couldn't accept that her best friend had died. And it was all because of her wrong decision. The guilt tormented her every minute. What had she done? Jake had sacrificed because of her, because of the blind trust he had in her leadership. He died while she couldn't protect him, couldn't ensure the safety of the people who had entrusted their lives to her. In the days after Jake's death, Emma couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and couldn't find an answer to her pain. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Jake, his smile, his trusting eyes as he sacrificed, would come to her clearly. She couldn't forget, and she couldn't forgive herself. The loss wasn't just the death of a friend, but the haunting of her wrong choice and the price Jake had to pay. But then, in her darkest moments, Emma realized that she couldn't let Jake's sacrifice be in vain. She couldn't allow herself to live in regret forever. They had fought together, and now, she would fight for Jake. For all the soldiers who had silently sacrificed without ever being recognized. Jake's sacrifice wasn't just an immense pain, it was also the driving force that pushed Emma to keep moving forward, to stand up and speak the truth about the cost of leadership in the military. She had lost her closest friend, but she would not let him die in vain. When Emma stood before the president, when she spoke to the nation about the cost of leadership, she thought of Jake, and with determination, she vowed to do whatever it took to ensure that people like Jake would not be forgotten. And in every word she spoke, she was also sending a farewell to her beloved friend, a farewell full of regret, but also filled with love and respect for him. When Emma entered the office of President Donald Trump at the White House, she felt like a small boat in a vast ocean. The luxurious room, walls adorned with historic paintings, and the solemn atmosphere made her feel small and out of place. But what surprised her most was the presence of the president. He didn't sit behind the large desk but stood up, extended his hand, and smiled. In that moment, Emma felt like an ordinary person, not a young military captain, but someone facing another person who understood pain and loss. "Emma," President Trump said in a warm and understanding voice, "I appreciate you writing the letter and requesting to meet with me. You know, not many dare to speak out like you, but I think it's the right thing to do." Emma looked at him, the leader of the nation, and in his eyes, there was no arrogance or distance. Instead, there was deep empathy that she hadn't expected. She thought he would be cold, always focused on his image and politics, but in reality, he wasn't just a powerful person. He was someone who had gone through struggles, losses, and war, a person who understood the price a soldier had to pay. When Emma started telling him about Lieutenant Jake Carter, about the wrong decision she made, President Trump didn't interrupt her. He listened patiently, his eyes focused on every word she said. Sometimes, he nodded in understanding, sometimes he sighed, as if he, too, was feeling the pain Emma carried inside. "You know, Emma," he said after she finished, "as president, I also have to make decisions that sometimes hurt not only me but those around me. These decisions are not always easy to make, and not always predictable in their consequences." The president didn't just share with Emma his own pain, but affirmed that leadership isn't just about victories. It's about shouldering the weight of the losses, the sacrifices no one can replace. In the wars he had been through, not everyone understood the price soldiers paid, and he, as the head of the country, also carried a similar responsibility, a heavy responsibility for the lives he had to protect. "Emma," he said, "your speech will be an important voice. I believe the people will listen to you. They will understand that leadership is not always about glory, but about the losses no one can see. And you, as a soldier, can be the one to help them see that. The empathy from President Trump made Emma feel relieved. She no longer felt alone in this fight. He, as the leader of the country, had understood and shared her pain. It felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Emma realized that leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about understanding the impact those decisions can have on the people you lead. The president wasn't just the head of the nation. He was a person with a compassionate heart, ready to listen to voices that, though small, were incredibly important, like Emma's. And this understanding created a strong connection between them, two people from different worlds, yet sharing the same belief that the true cost of leadership is not always victory, but facing the losses and sacrifices war brings. When Emma stepped onto the podium in front of the press, the atmosphere in the White House press room was heavy. She could feel every gaze on her, the flashing camera lights aimed directly at her face, as if every word she said would be judged. Representing the silent soldiers, those who had sacrificed and would never be recognized. "Good afternoon, everyone," Emma began, her voice steady despite the emotions rising inside her. "I stand here today not only for myself, but to speak for the soldiers who have given their lives for an ideal they never lived to see. I am here to remind you that leadership is not just about victory or glory, it's about the painful decisions and the sacrifices we face every day." Emma's words echoed in the room, not only in the White House but outside through television channels and social media. She shared the story of Lieutenant Jake Carter, her closest friend, who had sacrificed during a mission where Emma, as the commander, made a wrong decision. She didn't hide her pain, didn't shy away from admitting her mistake. And her words became a reminder of the true cost of leadership, a cost that not everyone is willing to accept. We talk a lot about victories, but do we ever really face the cost of them? Soldiers. They sacrifice not because they want to, but because we, the leaders, have made decisions that they have to bear the consequences for. Emma ended her speech with a direct question. So, are we truly ready to face the cost of leadership? Emma's speech immediately caused a stir in the media. On social media, people discussed it passionately. A large portion of veterans and military families expressed their deep emotions, feeling like they had finally been heard, like their sacrifices had meant something. "Finally, someone is speaking for us," a veteran tweeted. These people felt that Emma wasn't just a soldier, but someone brave enough to face the truth that many avoided. However, not everyone agreed with Emma. A significant portion of the public criticized her, saying she was too young and lacked the experience to represent the military. "She's not qualified to speak about the cost of leadership," some said, especially those who believed that the military should remain strong and never show weakness. Some military officials also reacted strongly, claiming that Emma had tarnished the dignity of the military by publicly revealing the pain and mistakes of the past. For Emma, these contrasting reactions didn't make her waver. She knew that no matter how many people criticized her, her purpose was still to speak the truth that many refused to face. She understood that leadership wasn't about enjoying power. It was about shouldering the responsibility for the people you lead, for the sacrifices they've endured. The significant impact of her speech not only sparked a debate on social media, but also forced the whole country to reflect on how they perceive the military, leadership, and sacrifice. It was a debate not only about the military, but also about the values the country follows. Do we truly understand the cost of leadership? Do we have the courage to recognize that sacrifice is not just the issue of a few, but of the entire nation? Emma succeeded in raising a big question that every citizen needs to answer. And no matter how much criticism she faced, she knew she had done the right thing. After her powerful speech, Emma didn't allow herself to stop at words. She knew that the attention she received was a great opportunity, but also an immense responsibility she had to shoulder. Speaking out about the cost of leadership and the sacrifices of soldiers wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a long journey. Immediately after returning from the White House, Emma began reaching out to veteran organizations. She sought out those who had spent their entire lives serving the country but had not received the proper care when they returned to civilian life. Many veterans faced mental health issues, loneliness, and poverty. Emma knew that if she just stopped at talking about these issues, everything would remain empty promises. She had to act. She had to do something concrete and meaningful. Emma started participating in mental health campaigns for veterans, establishing recovery programs for those who had gone through brutal wars. She didn't just visit hospitals. She organized meetings, speaking directly with veterans and listening to their stories. She shared their struggles and the pain they carried for a lifetime. She understood that each soldier had their own unique story, a piece of history that couldn't be easily erased. One of the first things Emma did was to raise awareness of the problems facing veteran organizations, where many soldiers had not received the help they needed. She collaborated with psychologists, doctors, and social activists to implement counseling programs, financial assistance, and educational support for veterans. Soon after, she organized a fundraising campaign to build recovery centers for those returning from war. With every meeting she attended, every conversation with a soldier, Emma became more certain that only when the public truly understood the cost of sacrifice could they create a real environment where soldiers were welcomed and supported when they returned. What's important is that Emma did all of this not just for her career, but for Jake, her dear friend, and all the soldiers who never had a chance to speak up. She always remembered Jake's words. "If I can't live to see the result, I hope at least someday people like me will be recognized and helped." And that is why Emma continued to fight, not just with words, but with real actions. Emma also began speaking at schools and youth organizations to inspire and emphasize the importance of understanding and respecting soldiers. She shared stories of losses, sacrifices that many of us never see, and how to protect the mental health of those who serve the country. Despite the many challenges and the late nights she had to spend planning new projects, Emma never felt tired. Every time she saw a veteran smile, every time she received a thank you letter from their families, she felt her belief and motivation strengthened. "We don't need pity," one veteran told her during a meeting. "We just need to be understood, respected, and have a chance to heal." And Emma knew that those words would be the motivation for her to continue contributing, not only for the veterans, but for all those who silently sacrificed for an ideal that not everyone could understand. Emma was not just someone who spoke. She was someone who acted, and she would never stop until every soldier, every person who carried pain and loss, was recognized and helped as they deserved. After months of working tirelessly on veteran support campaigns, Emma felt that she had accomplished part of her mission, but the road ahead was still long. However, whenever she felt weary, she thought of Jake, recalling the words he spoke in his final moments when he sacrificed during a battle that she had made a wrong decision. Jake was gone, but what he left in her heart was a motivation that would never fade. One afternoon, as work slowed down, Emma decided to visit where Jake rested. She didn't inform anyone, didn't bring anyone with her, just herself and the reflections of her lost friend. She drove to the military cemetery, where thousands of graves lay quietly under the setting sun. When she reached Jake's grave, Emma stopped. She gazed at the headstone, her eyes unable to hide the sorrow and longing. Everything around her was still, but inside her heart, memories of the time spent fighting with Jake flooded back. They had once laughed together, planned together, and now, only she was left with the memory of a friend who had sacrificed. Emma knelt beside the grave, her hands gently placed on the cold stone. She closed her eyes, feeling the deep silence of the cemetery, but also sensing a strength from deep within her. She couldn't change the past, couldn't bring Jake back to life, but she could continue to live for the ideal he died for. She could fight so that people like Jake would never be forgotten. "I spoke for you, Jake," Emma whispered, her voice choking with emotion but full of resolve. And they listened. These words were not just a farewell, but a promise. A promise she would keep for a lifetime. Emma knew she wouldn't stop until everyone understood the true cost of leadership, the sacrifices made by soldiers. And she would continue fighting not just for Jake, but for all those who had sacrificed without ever being remembered. As she stood up and turned to leave, Emma no longer felt alone. She carried with her a sense of comfort, knowing she had done everything she could, knowing this journey, no matter how difficult, was still ongoing. She would never give up, never back down. For those who had sacrificed, and for herself. With one last look at Jake's grave, Emma walked away, stronger than ever. Walking with a heart full of determination and belief in the mission she had chosen.